All right, maybe you can relate to that song, Trouble. We live in a world of trouble, and so did Moses, and we're going to learn lessons from the life of Moses, especially in the very first part of his life, or this is the first part of his life, from Exodus chapter 1 and 2, the first part of chapter 2. Here are the three topics in the series. Born in a world of trouble, faith in a world of trouble, and choices in a world of trouble. Moses was born into a world of trouble. His parents had to have faith when he was born in this world of trouble, and when he grew up, he was immediately confronted with choices. Now, everybody here in the room can relate to what I have up here. You were born into a world of trouble. And in this world of trouble, you and I need faith, and we have to make choices. So that's what the series is about. I know that everybody here can relate to it, because one thing I know about you, you've got trouble. We've all got trouble. We're in a world of trouble. In fact, let me remind you a little bit about your world of trouble. Maybe your trouble is family trouble. Maybe you're having trouble in your marriage if you're married. Trouble with a parent, or trouble with a kid, trouble with a brother or sister, trouble with in-laws, whatever it might be. Maybe you're having trouble with work. Maybe you're out of work and you're having trouble because you need work. Or maybe you have a job, but you've got trouble with your boss, you've got trouble with the people that you work with, or trouble with the people that work for you. Or maybe it's health. Maybe you've got health trouble. You've got physical problems. Or maybe it's not you, but it's somebody that you care about that you're worried about with their health issues. Or maybe it's financial trouble. Or maybe it's trouble because you're dealing with the death of someone that you love, or maybe an approaching death of someone that you love. And I have to stop here and say that's the trouble that I've been dealing with and our family's been dealing with, because tragically a couple of weeks ago, my 43-year-old nephew, Stephen, chose to take his life. It's been heartbreaking for me, for our family. He's not only my nephew, by the way, he's the brother of Stephen, or excuse me, his name's Stephen, but his brother's named David Austin, and some of you know him because he attends here at Cypress Valley Bible Church. And I want to say that I appreciate your prayers for our family during our time of trouble related to the death of a loved one. And I also want to take the opportunity to thank Russ Perry, because at the last minute we had to go to Tennessee. I had to preach the funeral, had to be with the family, of course. And Russ stepped up on short notice and preached last week, and I'm just so thankful give him a double thanks when you see him, because he really stepped up when he was needed. So it could be that you are facing family trouble, or work trouble, or health trouble, or financial trouble, or trouble over the death or approaching death of a loved one. And I want to put et cetera up there, because I'm sure there's something I haven't put up here that could include trouble that you're facing. Now, when we face trouble in this world of trouble, it's only natural to ask a question. And most people, you've asked it probably. Many people ask this question. It's a very simple, straightforward question, and here it is. In a world of trouble, where's God? Where's God? And that simple question can be elaborated in some other questions just like it. Like, why does God allow us to suffer? Or another question, why doesn't God protect us from suffering? And I know that many people struggle over that one right there, because if he's God, he could do that. He could protect us from suffering. Why doesn't he protect us from suffering? If he doesn't, is it because he doesn't care? That's a troubling question. And some people, well-meaning people, say, well, here's what they say. Well, we'll know someday. I don't think we'll find out today why God allows us to suffer, but Someday we'll know. Maybe you've heard that. Maybe you've said that. That's a sad answer. That's not a good answer. Here's the answer I want to give to that. We can know today. Before we walk out of the room, we can know the answer to that question is, why doesn't God protect us from suffering? It can be a life-changing answer for you if you've been struggling with these questions. So let's go back to the question. The main question here is, in a world of trouble, where's God? And I'm going to give the short, simple, straightforward answer. Here it is. God is at work. That's the answer. In a world of trouble, where's God? God is at work. And we just sang about it. We just sang about that. Let me remind you. Here's what many of us sang. Maybe you sang it. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop. You never stop working. You never stop working. Good lyrics, and they reflect what the Bible says. In many places, we see that truth all through the Bible, but one place it shouts to us is in this passage, Exodus chapter 1 and 2, especially as we're going to look today at chapter 1. Here's how Exodus 1 starts. Exodus 1:1. Now these are the names of the children of Israel who came to Egypt. Each man and his household came with Jacob. We've got two names up here, Israel and Jacob. Don't get confused. That's the same person. His name was Jacob, and God gave him another name, Israel. And he had 12 sons, the children of Israel, the Jewish people. And in a moment, we're going to read the names of those children of Israel, those children of Jacob. But what I want to point out now is where they are. Look at this, right in the middle. They came to Egypt. And if you know anything, or you're going to learn this morning, it would raise a question. What are they doing in Egypt? They don't belong in Egypt. Let me show you from the map that I'm going to put up next. Here's a map of the land of Canaan right up here. This is the modern day land of Israel. And over here is the land or the nation of Egypt. Now, Jacob's father was named Abraham. So he was the grandfather of these 12 sons of Jacob. God brought a man named Abraham to the land of Canaan and said, Abraham, here's what I'm going to do. I want to bring blessing to all the people of the earth. And the way I'm going to do it, I'm going to create a nation through your offspring. Your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, they're going to grow into a nation that will be a light to all the other nations of the world. All the nations of the world, I want them to be blessed through the nation I want to create through you and your offspring. All right? And Abraham, this is your land for your people. This is the promised land, and that's where you belong. I'm going to build up a great nation in this land. All right? Well, then what are they doing in Egypt? Where is God? I mean, they're supposed to be in that land, growing and multiplying as a nation. Well, what are they doing down here in Egypt? Well, we're going to find out in a moment, but first, let's keep reading the verse that tells us what their names are. Here are the names of 11 of Jacob's sons, Israel's sons. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin. Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And they were living in the land of Canaan. They were born there. They grew up there. How they been doing up there in the land of Canaan? I mean, we would have read about that in the book of Genesis, which precedes the book of Exodus. And if you read through the last chapters of the book of Genesis, you'd learn how the children of Israel were doing. So rather than going back and reading all that, you can read it on your own, but here's a synopsis of how they're doing. It's not a pretty picture. Here it is. Adultery, fornication, murder, cruelty, jealousy, sinful marriages, worshiping other gods. That's not good for the chosen people that are to be a light to the world. It's just the opposite that's happening. They're a mess. And they're becoming just like the people amongst whom they live, the Canaanites that are in that land. In fact, some of them were marrying Canaanite women and just becoming just like them. They were taking on their ways, their culture. And here's what would have happened if that had continued. The children of Israel would have disintegrated into the culture and the people of the Canaanites. They would have no longer been a distinct people that God wanted them to be. That was a problem. And so through the work of God, they ended up in Egypt. And we're going to see about that as we keep reading. God had to get them away from the Canaanites, and he did. And we're going to learn a little bit about how he did that as we keep reading in Exodus 1. Here's what we read next. All those who were descendants of Jacob were 70 persons, for Joseph was in Egypt already. Okay? So the day came that all of the children of Israel left the land of Canaan and went to the land of Egypt. Altogether, it was an extended family of 70 people. You could have got them on a couple of charter buses. Not a very big nation. And Joseph was already in Egypt. Now, he was the 12th child that wasn't mentioned here. We read about the 11, but Joseph was already in Egypt. You know how he got down there? His brothers sold him into slavery. They wanted to kill him because they were so jealous of him. They said, "No, let's not kill him. Let's just sell him into slavery to the Egyptians." Okay, so he ended up in Egypt, and he gained the favor of the king of Egypt, and he rose to a prominent position. And there was a famine that God brought over all the land, but Joseph was a man responsible for storing up grain in Egypt. And the children of Israel had nowhere to go except to Egypt, where there was food, and Joseph, who was in a position to make it happen for them to be in Egypt. It's an amazing story of how God got them down there to Egypt. But they're not going to stay there for very long, right? I mean, they're supposed to be in the land of Canaan. God will get them back up there to Canaan, right? This is just temporary. Go down there and eat for a while till the famine's over, and then you go back. Nope, that's not how it happened. Here's what happened to these 70 people, these 12, Jacob and his 12 sons and the 70 family members. Here's what happened. Joseph died, all his brothers, and all that generation. They died in the land of Egypt. That doesn't sound right. These are supposed to be the people in the promised land, becoming the chosen nation. And they ended up as refugees in Egypt and died there. And if you were living in that day, and even today, it should raise a question. Here's the question. In a world of trouble, where's God? I mean, why did God allow that to happen? Couldn't he have prevented that? Couldn't he have done something to keep it from happening? Where's God? Short answer, here it is. God is at work. And we know he was at work because of the next verse that we read. Verse 7. But the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, multiplied and grew exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. And if you stop with me and think about the words that we're looking at on that screen, look at those words. Fruitful, increased abundantly, multiplied, exceedingly mighty, filled, the land was filled with them. This is amazing that God was at work in the midst of their trouble to do a great and mighty thing. He was causing this nation to grow and multiply and be fruitful in the midst of their trouble. In the midst of their trouble, God was at work to cause them to grow as the nation he wanted them to become. So let me summarize what we've seen about the people of Israel so far in one word, and the word is trouble. What was the trouble? They were refugees in the land of Egypt. But now as we keep reading in chapter 1, there's more trouble. Here's what the more trouble is as we keep reading. Now, there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, "Look, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And it happen in the event of war that they also join our enemies and fight against us, and so go up out of the land." So what did they do? He says we've got to slow down the growth. What are we going to do? Therefore they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with their burdens. And they built for Pharaoh supply cities, Pithom and Ramses. Now, there's one word, it's not on the screen, but here's what's happening. Slavery. The Egyptians made the Hebrew children their slaves. So they made slave labor out of them, and they built these big cities. The Jews, the Hebrew children, the children of Israel, built these cities, Pithom and Ramses. I mean, these were big projects, and this was oppressive slavery. And why did the king come up with this plan? He figured, that'll slow them down. They'll quit having children at the rate they're having them. They're not going to want to keep bringing children into this world of slavery. We're going to discourage them. We're going to slow down the growth so that they don't become more and mightier than we Egyptians. So let's go back to our question. In a world of trouble, where's God? Well, God's at work. It looks like he's not. It looks like the trouble is something that God's not dealing with, but God is at work. We know that from what the next verse tells us. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. And they were in dread of the children of Israel. The Egyptians were in dread of the children of Israel. And don't miss these first two lines. The more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. The more trouble that they faced, the more God was at work to cause them to grow. God was at work in the midst of their trouble to cause them to grow. So how did the Egyptians respond to that growth? They just doubled down on the slavery. That's what they did. We know that because of what we read next. So the Egyptians made the children of Israel serve with rigor, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and brick, and in all manner of service in the field. They doubled down on the trouble, on the slavery. So let's summarize the trouble that the children of Israel are in. First, they faced trouble. They were refugees in Egypt. More trouble. They were subjected to slavery. Now we're going to read about even more trouble. And here's what we read. Then the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, of whom the name of one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other Puah, and he said, when you do the duties of a midwife for the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stools, if it is a son, then you shall kill him. But if it's a daughter, then she shall live. So the king of Egypt said, I'll slow down the growth rate. I'll slow down the growth of these people that are becoming so large in number and mighty. Those women that are responsible for helping those mothers give birth, I'm going to give them an order. If it's a boy, you kill him. Girls can live, but if we kill the boys, that'll stop the population growth of the children of Israel. Murder by midwife was the plan. And again, when the children of Israel heard about this, I'm sure they would have asked the same question that they would have already been asking about their situation, and it's this, here it is again. In a world of trouble, where's God? Answer, God is at work. And we see it again in the next verse. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the male children alive. Don't miss that first line. They feared God more than they feared the king. They feared what God would do if they killed Jewish baby boys. I mean, what's God going to do if we are responsible for killing those baby boys? We don't want to have to answer to God for that. We'd rather answer to the king of Egypt for not doing it than we would to the God of heaven for doing it. And so, what did they do? They did not do as the king commanded them. They saved the male children alive, and God got involved on behalf of those midwives. Here's what we read next. Therefore, God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very mighty. God was pleased with those midwives. He blessed them. He rewarded them, as we'll see in a moment. And notice this again. The people multiplied and grew very mighty. Here we go again. Every time trouble intensifies, the growth of the children of Israel becomes more prevalent. They continue to grow, and they continue to grow very mighty. Now, it says here, God dwelt well with the midwives. The next verse explains how he dwelt well with the midwives. And so it was because the midwives feared God that God provided households for them. God gave them families. He rewarded them for their faith and obedience in the midst of that trouble. Now, the text doesn't say, but we know this from many other scriptures, that someday when they stand before Jesus, they're going to be rewarded for their faith and obedience. I mean, they were rewarded on earth, but they're going to be, even more important, they're going to be rewarded in a future kingdom for their faith and obedience in the midst of that trouble. All right, so let's catch up on what's going on here. Here's the list. Children of Israel facing trouble. Refugees in the land of Egypt. More trouble. Slavery in the land of Egypt. Even more trouble. An edict to kill the baby boys. And it doesn't end, because now there's still even more trouble as we continue to read in Exodus 1. So Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, every son who is born you shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive. Now the previous command was to 2 women. Now who does the command go to? Notice the word all. Everybody in Egypt, Egyptians, Israelites, I issue this decree. If you know of or see a Hebrew baby boy, you're to throw him in the river. Kill him. If it's a daughter, you can save her alive. What's the motive? Well, we've already read it. He wanted to stop the growth of the Hebrew children, this nation that was becoming so big compared to the Egyptians. And he was determined to make it happen through this edict. And I'm sure that at this point, the children of Israel were asking this question again more strongly than they had asked it before. In our world of trouble, where's God? And the answer still comes through. God is still at work. And we know that because of what we read in the first verse of chapter 2. Here's what we read in the first verse of chapter 2. A man of the house of Levi took as wife a daughter of Levi. So the woman conceived and bore a son. One son is spoken of here. And as we go on to read, we learn that this is Moses. And these are his parents, the man of the house of Levi and his wife, a daughter of Levi. They had a son. And as we keep reading in the book of Exodus, we learn that God worked through this son, later we learn his name is Moses, to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt into the promised land. But that's a great story for another day. The point is, God was at work, still at work. Here's the summary of what we see. In a world of trouble, where's God? God is at work. And I want to review what we've seen so far this morning about how God was at work by reviewing the highlights of Exodus 1. Okay, here are the highlights that we read. All right? Children of Israel became refugees in the land of Egypt. They became slaves in the land of Egypt. They were under an edict of murder by midwife and then an edict of murder by all. That's trouble, even more trouble, still even more trouble. But here's what we've read that came out of this trouble. And I'm going to give you the 3 verses that pretty well say the same thing again and again and again. Here they are. The children of Israel increased and grew exceedingly mighty. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. And the people multiplied and grew very mighty. Now, this is powerful stuff that we're reading here. This shouts to us. Look at what's in every verse. Grew. Where is it? It's down here. Last word. They grew. Down here, they grew. And then adjectives that go with it. They grew exceedingly mighty. They multiplied and grew. They multiplied and grew very mighty. This is amazing. That the trouble gets worse and worse and worse, and the growth gets more and more and more. Wow, does this shout to us? In a world of trouble, where's God? God's at work. He is working in the midst of this trouble to cause and bring about a great thing in the lives of these people. And that is their growth as a nation. Numerical growth, and hopefully spiritual growth at the same time, that they would become the nation that God wanted them to be as a light in this world. Now, there's one more verse I read earlier, I'll look at it again, that adds to the excitement of what we see God doing here. Here it is again. Man of the house of Levi took as a wife the daughter of Levi, and the woman conceived and bore a son. There was growth, and there was the birth of a deliverer that would come and deliver them one day. In their world of trouble, God was at work to help them to grow. All right, so that's the story of the world in which Moses is to be born. And next week we'll read about his birth. But today I want us to think about what are the lessons from the life of Moses. In a world of trouble, what are the lessons for you and me? I mean, we're not here just to learn about history. We're not here to learn about Israel and Moses. We're here to learn, what does this have to do with you and me? What is it that we can gain from this? What does God say to us to help us today in our world of trouble? And this is the way that we should try to apply the Bible. In fact, we sang about it just before I got up here. Let me remind you of what we sang. And maybe you sang it. If not, you heard everybody else singing it, or many other people singing it. Here are the words that we sang. I'm calling on the God of Moses. You heard your children then, you hear your children now. You're the same God. You are the same God. You moved in power then, and you, God, you move in power now. You're the same God. You're the same God, and he is the same God. He's the same God that wants to move in your life and mine in our world of trouble, just as he moved in the lives of the children of Israel in their world of trouble. And I want us to see this from a few passages in the New Testament that help to bring this home. The first one is the words of Jesus himself in John chapter 16, verse 33. Jesus said, "In the world you will have tribulation." Now, I think that might be one of the most overlooked verses in the whole Bible, even for Christians. Because sometimes when we face tribulation and trouble, we think like, well, this shouldn't be. Well, where's God? God doesn't want me to face all this tribulation and trouble. Is that what Jesus said? I'm asking, is that what he said? The answer is no. Look, he didn't say, I promise you, I'm going to protect you from trouble. Just the opposite. He said, I promise you, in the world, you will have tribulation. So he didn't promise that he would protect us from trouble. He promised us we were going to have it. That's Jesus, not me. Jesus said, in the world, you will have tribulation. So when you're facing trouble, don't think, oh, what's the matter? This shouldn't be happening. Jesus said, oh, yeah, actually, it should. It's what life is while you're living this life on earth. But that's not the end of the verse, thank God. He had something more to add to this, very important. He said, but be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. Be of good cheer, I have good things to do in the midst of your tribulation. In the midst of the tribulation you face in this world, be of good cheer. I've overcome that. I'm going to accomplish something great in your life. Now, what is the something great? Well, here's a passage that tells us what the something great is. It's in James chapter 1. Here's how James put it. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials. Count it all joy in your world of trouble. It's paraphrased. Well, why would I count it joy when I'm in trouble? Why would I count it joy in these various trials? He goes on to say, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. When I'm in trouble, when I've got these problems, it's a test of my faith. Hopefully I'll respond in faith. I'll call out to God. I'll seek to trust him. And then I become more patient. I grow spiritually. That's not the end of the verse or end of the statement, because he says, let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. And he says perfect, he doesn't mean, literally, without sin. He's saying that you would grow, that you become more perfect and complete. Growth is the word that would summarize this, that you may grow. Why does God allow trials? To test our faith so that we'll trust him and call out to him and draw near to him and grow. It's growth. Remember, over and over again with the children of Israel, what was God doing? Causing them to grow. Over and over again, we read in the Bible that what's God doing when trouble comes in your life? He's at work to help you to grow. In fact, here's the bottom line. This is the bottom line of the message today. In a world of trouble, God is at work to help you grow spiritually. I mean, with the children of Israel in their world of trouble, he was at work to help them to grow numerically and spiritually. In your life, when God allows trouble, in a world of trouble, count on it. I'm telling you, I'm promising you, we're reading it in the Bible. God is at work to help you to grow spiritually. But that's not all. There's one more line to the bottom line, but first I want to share a verse to tell you where I'm going to get this bottom line. It's in Romans 8:18. Paul wrote, I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed to us. Paul says, man, life is hard. There's a lot of trouble in the present time, a lot of suffering. But this suffering isn't worthy to be compared with the glory that God's going to give someday if I'm faithful to him in the midst of my trouble. What he's talking about is eternal reward. The glory of the eternal reward. If you're faithful to God, if you walk in faith toward God in the midst of your trouble, God's going to reward you for that on a future day. And that reward won't even compare to the suffering that you and I face right now. So I gave you this verse to complete my bottom line. So let me go back to the bottom line. In a world of trouble, God is at work to help you grow spiritually. One more thing. And be rewarded forever. In a world of trouble, God is at work to help you grow spiritually and be rewarded forever. Now, try to remember that bottom line as I go back to your world of trouble. This slide I had up earlier. You got family trouble? You've got family trouble? God is at work in the midst of your family trouble to help you grow spiritually and be rewarded forever. You got work trouble, you got problems with work, whatever it might be. Listen, God is at work to help you grow spiritually and be rewarded forever. You got health issues that have you afraid for you or someone else. Listen, God is at work to help you to grow spiritually and be rewarded forever. You got financial issues, God is at work to help you grow spiritually and be rewarded forever. You struggling, are you grieving over the death of a loved one? God is at work to help you grow spiritually and be rewarded forever if you and I respond in faith toward him in the midst of the trouble. Here's the bottom line one last time. In a world of trouble, God is at work to help you grow spiritually and be rewarded forever. All right, that's the first lesson from the life of Moses in this series. Next week, we're going to focus on number 2, faith in a world of trouble. We're going to learn from Moses' parents. We all need faith in the midst of the world of trouble in which we live. All right, I'm going to close in prayer here in a moment, and then I'll be up front if you have a question about the message. Or if you just want to come up and introduce yourself, I'd love to meet you. Let's pray. Father, I know that every individual here in the room today is facing trouble in this world. Life is hard. We struggle in many ways. And you know what each one is facing. And even though I can't call out every name in the room, I want to pray for each individual here. I pray that you would help this one to see you in the midst of the trouble, to trust you in the midst of the trouble. I pray that you would be merciful to this person and lighten their load according to your plan and purpose. But Father, most importantly, that you would help this one to grow stronger spiritually, knowing that he or she will be rewarded forever. Thank you for hearing our prayer. I thank you for the way that you'll answer. Amen. Thanks for coming. Hope to see you next week.